The American patrol had only stopped beside the ruined square to check a stalled supply truck. But then a soldier heard metal scraping behind a burned bakery and found three German children digging through army trash with their hands. One hiding bread crusts inside his coat, while another tried to swallow spoiled potato peels before anyone could take them away, forcing the lieutenant to radio Patton before the men understood whether they had found hunger, theft, or something worse. The patrol entered the German town shortly after sunrise, moving past shattered shop windows, broken carts, and a church wall marked by smoke from the last week of fighting. A supply truck had stalled near the square, and the lieutenant ordered his men to spread out while the driver opened the hood and checked the fuel line. One soldier, named Miller, walked behind a burned bakery to look for a water pump, and he stopped when he heard metal scraping inside a pile of army ration tins. He stepped closer and found three children crouched beside a trash pit, pulling at discarded food wrappers, cracked tins, and potato skins blackened by dirt. The oldest boy tried to run, but his younger sister slipped on wet ash and fell against the wall with a handful of bread crusts pressed to her chest. Miller called for the lieutenant, then lowered his rifle and backed away because the children were not armed, not hiding soldiers, and not old enough to understand the danger around them. The lieutenant arrived, saw the boy swallow something too quickly, and ordered the medic forward before the child could choke on spoiled food. The medic opened his bag, checked the girl's hands, and found cuts from sharp tin edges, while the smallest child kept staring at the ration boxes stacked in the truck. A German woman came from a doorway and tried to pull the children away, but she stopped when she saw the American soldiers forming a half circle around the trash pit. The lieutenant asked the interpreter why children were eating from army waste, and the woman answered that the town ration store had been locked since the local officials vanished. That answer changed the moment from pity to alarm, because the Americans had passed a warehouse the night before with sacks of flour still visible behind its windows. The lieutenant ordered two men to guard the children, sent Miller to bring the truck driver, and radioed battalion that German civilians were scavenging spoiled food near sealed supplies. By mid-morning, the stalled truck had become the least important problem in the square, because American soldiers were now standing between starving children and a locked town store no one wanted to open. Subscribe for more forgotten German POW stories like this one. The escalation began when the patrol reached the ration warehouse and found the front door chained from the outside, with a German municipal seal still hanging from the lock. The interpreter called for the town clerk, but no official came forward, and the civilians in the nearby doorways looked away as if the building itself could punish them. Miller climbed onto a broken cart and looked through a high window, where he saw flour sacks, canned vegetables, dried beans, and crates marked for civilian distribution. The lieutenant ordered the chain cut, but a local policeman appeared from an alley and shouted that the Americans had no right to open German property without municipal authority. The lieutenant answered by pointing toward the children near the trash pit, then ordered the military police sergeant to take the bolt cutters from the truck. The warehouse door opened with a snap of metal, and the smell of grain rolled into the street while more civilians began gathering around the square. Inside, the Americans found shelves full enough to feed the town for days, but the distribution ledger on the desk had not been updated since the retreat. The local policeman claimed the food had to be preserved for order, yet the medic brought the smallest child inside and showed the lieutenant how the boy's legs shook when he tried to stand. That visual evidence changed the crowd, because women stepped from doorways and began naming missing ration cards, closed offices, and men who had taken keys before fleeing. The lieutenant ordered a temporary issue table set up at the warehouse door, but the policeman grabbed the ledger and tried to leave with it under his coat. Miller stopped him at the alley mouth, and the ledger fell open on the ground, showing names crossed out in pencil and several pages removed from the back. The interpreter read enough to discover that families linked to suspected former soldiers had been denied food, including the family of the three children found behind the bakery. The lieutenant realized the children were not starving only because the town was ruined, but because someone had decided which families were allowed to eat after surrender. He sent a second radio message, stronger than the first, saying civilian food stores were being withheld, ration records were altered, and hungry children had been found eating. Army refused while locked supplies sat less than 50 yards away. By noon, the town square filled with civilians, American guards, and open sacks of flour, and the lieutenant knew the matter had grown beyond one patrol's authority. The major consequence came when the battalion command ordered the town placed under temporary military control until the food records could be secured. Military police took the local policemen into custody, sealed the clerk's office, and posted American guards at the warehouse doors. The lieutenant ordered the medic to examine every child brought to the square, and within an hour a line formed beside the church steps with mothers holding ration cards, blankets, and small tin cups. The first emergency meal was not cooked in a kitchen, but in two Army field pots set up near the fountain, where soldiers stirred flour, beans, and water into something safe enough for weak stomachs. The three children from the trash pit were brought forward first, not as a reward, but because the medic feared they would become sick if they were given too much too fast. A German man in a torn coat protested that Americans were feeding enemy children while American dead still lay west of the town, and several soldiers turned toward him before the lieutenant ordered everyone back. The argument spread into the street, where exhausted civilians began accusing each other of hiding food, collaborating with officials, or taking extra shares during the last days of the war. The lieutenant moved the distribution table away from the crowd and placed it under military police control, forcing every person to pass through a single line by household name. The removed pages from the ration ledger became the next problem, because without them the Americans could not tell which families had been erased from the system. Miller returned to the burned bakery and found a metal cash box hidden beneath fallen bricks, containing ration cards, torn ledger pages, and a list of families marked as unreliable. The name of the children's mother appeared on that list, with a note saying no flour was to be issued until her missing husband reported to authorities. That discovery turned the food crisis into a justice problem, because starving children had been used to pressure an absent adult who might already be dead. The lieutenant sent the cash box, ledger, and list to battalion headquarters, and the reply came back within the hour that General Patton's staff had been notified. By evening, the children were sleeping inside the church under Army blankets. The warehouse remained guarded, and the town waited for the arrival of a man whose name had already become louder than any order posted on the wall. The reversal began the next morning when the town expected another supply officer, but Patton's staff car drove into the square before the church bell had finished ringing. Patton stepped out with dust on his boots, passed the waiting lieutenant without ceremony, and walked straight to the trash pit behind the burned bakery where the first children had been found. He looked at the torn tins, spoiled peels, and blood on the edge of a rusted can, then ordered the interpreter to bring the town clerk, the local policeman, and the warehouse keys into the open square. The clerk arrived shaking, claiming the food had been locked to prevent looting, but Patton ordered the warehouse doors opened behind him so every civilian could see what had been kept inside. The reversal landed when Patton did not begin by accusing the starving civilians of disorder, but instead turned to the officials and asked why children were eating garbage beside full shelves. The interpreter repeated the question in German, and the square went quiet because the answer could no longer be hidden behind paperwork, retreat, or fear. The local policeman tried to say certain families were politically unsafe, but Patton cut him off and ordered the cash box placed on the distribution table. The torn ledger pages were spread out beside the ration cards, and the children's mother was called forward to identify her name on the erased list. She stepped into the square holding the smallest child, and the boy hid his face against her coat while the same officials who had denied food stood under American guard. Patton ordered every marked family restored to the ration roll immediately, with food issued by household need rather than by old accusations. He also ordered that no German official would control distribution until American officers verified every ledger, every card, and every warehouse key. Then he said the line the lieutenant wrote down later. A town that feeds politics before children has surrendered nothing worth defending. The reversal was complete because the discovery behind the bakery had changed from a scene of pity into a public stripping of local power, and the men who had controlled hunger were forced to watch the first erased families receive food in front of the entire square. The final irreversible event came that afternoon, when the removed ration records led military police to a second locked cellar beneath the clerk's office. The cellar door had been covered by broken furniture, but the key from the policeman's belt opened it after 2 hard turns. Inside, the Americans found crates of flour, dried meat, soap, candles, and blankets stacked behind barrels, with chalk marks showing they had been reserved for officials and their families. The crowd outside surged when the first crate was carried into the light, and the lieutenant had to order soldiers across the doorway before anger turned into revenge. Patton did not allow the crowd to enter because he ordered the goods counted by American quartermasters and issued first to children, sick civilians, and families whose cards had been removed. The local clerk was removed from office on the spot. The policeman was taken away for further questioning, and the town ration system was placed under military administration. The irreversible part came when Patton ordered the warehouse seal replaced with an American notice stating that no food in the town could be withheld from children for political punishment. The notice was nailed to the warehouse door in English and German, while the mother of the 3 children received flour, beans, soap, and a medical pass for the next morning. Miller watched the oldest boy hold a ration tin without opening it, as if he still expected someone to take it away before the family reached the church. The medic knelt beside him, opened the tin properly, and handed him a spoon so he would not have to eat with his hands again. By dusk, the field kitchen was serving in the square, and the trash pit behind the bakery had been filled with rubble so no child would return to it looking for food. The final change came when the town ledger was rewritten on a new table under American guard, and every erased family name was copied back in ink. What began as 3 children digging through garbage ended with the collapse of a hidden ration system, and no official in that town could again decide hunger behind a locked door. 3 days later, the burned bakery wall still stood, but the trash pit behind it was gone, covered with broken bricks and marked by a wooden stake. The 3 children came to the square with their mother and received food from the same warehouse they had once been denied. When the lieutenant filed his report, he placed the rusted ration tin beside the ledger pages and wrote that Patton's order had changed the town because it made one rule impossible to ignore. No child would eat from army trash while food remained locked away. Most people know how World War II ended. Very few know what happened inside these prison camps. Subscribe for more untold WWII stories.